And looks like we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Dan. It's Thursday. It's time for our weekly Anchore open source gardening session. So on today, we've got Will Murphy, we've got Chris Phillips, we've got Keith Santo. We're the Anchore open source engineering team. Over here, we work on open source tools for inspecting software and analyzing software in different forms, container images, local directories, source code checkouts. And what our tools fundamentally do is figure out what you've got in the form of SBOMs and other types of analysis material. But then also we've got tools that take that information and do higher level functions like vuln scanning, license detection, that kind of higher level function compliance and security stuff. All of our tools are over on github.com/Anchore. You'll see our open source tools. The main ones are Syft and Grype, Grant, Funnel, but there's a number of other projects over there. So every week we like to get together and go over our open tickets. We look at issues, we look at pull requests, we look at open topics, and have a discussion amongst the technical team. And typically we do that by looking at our needs discussion labels on the various GitHub issues and PRs. And we'll sometimes have time to pop over to Discourse as well and look at open conversations there. So I'll stop talking and we can get started with the session. Up on the screen here, I've got Anchore. These are the open issues that have the needs discussion labels. So yeah, let's take it away. Anything you guys want to highlight? Should we just start at the top? On the screen here, I've got.
Yeah, I'm happy to start at the top. I don't have anything to highlight for this week. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up specifically before we jump in?
Let's take it away. Anything
Nope,
you
I
guys
got nothing in
want to
particular.
start at the top. On the screen here, I've got. All right,
Yeah, I'm happy to start at the
let's go
top.
for it.
I
So
don't
the
have
first
anything
one we've got
to
here
highlight for this
is
week.
add support for
Anyone else
clean start
have anything they want to bring up
packages.
specifically before we jump in?
307. Nope, I got nothing in particular.
All right, let's go for it. So the first one we've got here is add support for clean start packages.
Oh yeah, this one. I think Keith and I added needs discussion during a triage the other day. And so yeah, I don't know a ton about Clean Start. It looks like did they answer us? Can we scroll down a little bit? Other day. And so yeah, I don't know a ton about Clean Start. It looks like did they answer us? Can we scroll down a little bit? Okay, that doesn't really. It's not much of an answer. And so what I think what we sort of wanted to discuss is like what we want to include in like the default Grape DB. I think one interesting trend we're seeing is lots of people are making like secure by default Linux distros or like selling special zero CVE Linux containers of some form. And this is great. I generally support this. CVEs are bad. Linux containers are super cool. But it's different because a lot of times in the past, when we had contributions to Funnel, it's like, we are a major Linux distro that you have heard of, and we have this giant feed of all our D packages that are vulnerable, and we would like Funnel to include it. And we're like, yes, please, like we would love to do that. And then recently we've been seeing lots and lots of like earlier distros, like startups, asking like, hey, can we have a funnel provider? And like generally the answer is still yes. I think this one kind of surprised us because as far as we can tell, there is one CVE in the data feed they are proposing adding to funnel. And that seems like maybe not enough data to, I don't know where the line is between like, we would definitely take like a giant Linux distro with thousands of installs and if you made a distro this weekend and it only works on your laptop, maybe it's not quite time to add a funnel provider. I don't know, somewhere in between there. So that was sort of my question is like, do we have, a process for like a decision here? Do we have a threshold? I think it sounds like they're sort of in flight. I don't know. They have a huge data set of global CVEs and our own CVEs. I don't know what that I don't know exactly what that means. I think we put needs discussion on it because we weren't sure what to say to somebody who wanted us to build a vulnerable provider that would pull in exactly one record. Or maybe it's two records, but they're like aliases of each other, or something like that. So that was what I remember. Keith, what do you remember?
Yeah, well, and I also wanted to like just bring up a couple, um, absolutely what you said, like that's why we slap needs discussion on here. But one of the things that we try to be especially sensitive to is the size of the Grype database. And so like we have to balance, do we take the entire world and put all the data in there versus, you know, do we take the most widely used things or exactly what? And so, that's one of the decision points that would go into, accepting a new data source into the something that gets bundled and included in every single daily database that every single user downloads the millions of times, over the internet. And like, maybe it's so it sounds like maybe they actually have quite a few more CVEs that just haven't been put in this repo yet. That's maybe what they mean by that. I don't really know either for sure, but what if we assume that that's the case? Maybe they do have a big data set with, you know, I think part of the thing is that like I would really like to know like very specifically how big that is, because of the reason of how big is it going to grow the Grype database.
Right. Well,
I think part of the thing is that like
well, and I
I
think
would
one of
really
the
like to
things I
know
want to
like very
understand is
specifically how
like
big that is,
what is
because of
different,
the reason
right?
of
There are
how big
lots
is
of
it going to grow
projects that are
the
sort
Grype
of
database.
that
Um,
have a lot of the same information, but and so like somebody asked today, like crates.io, the Rust package manager central thing, has its own vulnerability feed, and we don't have a vulnerable provider for that today. And somebody asked, would be interested in doing that? And my answer to that was basically, is there stuff in there that's not in GHSA? Because we already support scanning crates against GitHub security advisories. And so that's sort of my other question here is like if they bring in a huge data set of global CVEs, is that going to be all the same stuff that the NVD provider pulls down? And maybe that's a question for them and not for us to discuss here. Anyway, I saw Chris, I noticed you had your hand up. Go ahead, Chris.
I think you just nailed it because what we've kind of been circling around is the overlap of data. And so if you're giving us, let's say your feed has 100,000 records and 999,999 are the same as NVD. Like at some point I would like to see maybe a way we could do the deduplication, but at that like kind of scale too, it's just what are we doing not incorporating those records into the data feeds that already exist? Is the friction too high to get it into there? Is the friction too high to get it into GHSA? Like at that like kind of scale too. I want to know and to see what makes some of these data feeds different from their compatriots that currently exist. Because to both you and Keith's point, the more we get to like the 15th and 16th iteration of secure containers by someone else, and if each of them have all their individual feeds, and all those feeds are more or less like different shades of green as far as the differential in data between them, then there has to be a way to make it so that people aren't pulling 50 different shades of green down in their database and having it be n number of gigs larger than it actually should be when it's currently still sub a gigabyte.
yeah, I think there's one thing like since we implemented V6, there is some amount of deduplication. We have the ability. So the way that the database is structured is there's a kind of a centralized blob table, and a lot of the like descriptions and things like that get put in there. Um, but when we find duplicates of those, we don't store two of them. So that was one of the big ways we were able to reduce the size from V5, because we ended up with a lot of records that were really just direct copies of the same thing. And so like if that was the case here where they had a whole bunch of different things and they were really all the same as like exactly what we got from NVD or something like that, then I think some like a lot of it potentially could get deduplicated today. But if it's like, an Alpine feed where they just have some advisories over fixes that differ from any information anywhere else, then that tends to be, I think, a lot smaller of a data set also, right? And it would probably be easier to include that way. And I mean, I guess I also wonder if like there could be something done at the vulnerable provider level too, to sort of suss some of that out. And then like that particular provider could provide like more of a diff into the database than just all of the raw records that they provide too. To sort of suss some of that out, and then like that particular provider could provide like more of a diff into the database.
Just kind of a meta comment. One thing I've noticed is people like approach us adding and want to add new data sources to Grype is that we often end up with a sort of like low bandwidth, long conversation over GitHub comments about like, what is your feed? How do we download it? Where can I find a test image? And some of that's answered in this comment. I'm not going out this user particularly, but I think that it might be helpful to like talk to the team, because adding a new data source or like matching behavior on like a major package manager or something is a really big change. And so it might be really helpful if people want to come to like our every other week office hours, or if I try to be reasonably responsive if you at me on GitHub or something and say, hey, can we set up a call? We'll try to figure that out. Because some of these, like, there are a bunch of questions we end up asking a lot. Like, is your list of vulnerabilities like comprehensive, or are you describing fixes over another set of vulnerabilities, right? Like Ubuntu's vulnerability feed is comprehensive. It describes all the packages, in fact, all the Ubuntu debs all over everywhere. But then like Alpine SecDB, it basically assumes that you scanned with NVD CPEs, and then Alpine is like, not that one, not that one, not that one, which is a smaller data set. And like they can both be incorporated, but it's worth having these conversations maybe in a higher bandwidth way.
Right. So I mean, that's like part of the question. I guess, another part of the question, going back to the, original thing that you said there, Will, is like, what sort of criteria should we have for including, a particular feed in the Grype database? And, I don't think the right answer is something like, oh, you're not popular enough. Like that's not a good answer to me either. But I do think that like there is some, some amount of, well, you don't really have any users, so like what value is it providing to the community that's actually using Grype? It's actually making it worse because of the size increases that come along. And so it's a really challenging thing for me to even come up with any type of metrics.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you mostly done? I had an idea. So one of the things that I really like to use to motivate Grype changes is incorrect matching. Like if you can say, hey, here is a public OCI image, here is a public Git repository. If you scan it with Grype, this CVE shows up and it shouldn't. This CVE doesn't show up and it should. Like then like we really don't want Grype to be wrong. That's and so if you can say Grype is wrong about this, that's a really clear motivation. And so I think that can be one of the, and so if you can say sort of proof points, because it's like, there are lots of, for example, a lot of the Red Hat clones, we used to have very, very high fidelity matching just by pretending they were Red Hat. But recently, like, for example, on the Linux started, like sometimes they patch security vulnerabilities at an earlier upstream than Red Hat does, or sometimes they have like different backporting, different support policies or whatever. So we started having like incorrect matching on Alma Linux containers, and we don't want that. And so that was good signal that like, hey, it's time to go build a vulnerable provider for the Alma Linux OSV data and pull it in and change the RPM matcher to account for it where appropriate. And like those changes were very motivated. But as long as it was in the situation where we are a bug for bug Red Hat like, it wasn't worth doing because Grype would just get the right answer by pretending it was Red Hat. So maybe that's a good criteria, is like if you can show me some public artifacts with some false positives or especially false negatives, that is CVEs that are present that Grype misses, then that's a really clear signal that we need to do something better. And I think maybe that's also just a good way of like starting the project, because then you know when you're done, right? If you say like, here's a public OCI image, because we want people who are working on funnel who don't work for us to be able to scan your artifacts without secrets or anything. So like here's a public Docker image. I expected to find these 5 CVEs on these packages and I didn't. And like an issue like that is like, okay, like now we have to go figure out why. And like maybe it's a bug in the RPM matcher, maybe you launched a new distro and there's no vulnerable provider, maybe something in between. But like it also then like we can build like that end-to-end test case. Like once we start finding those CVEs or fixing those false positives, we become like done with the feature. And that's a good, I wonder if that's just what we should ask for people, is like give us some false positives and some false negatives against a public artifact, and that's a good issue. We can work with that. How do y'all feel about that?
Yeah, I want to just fully thumbs up that kind of framing, because the more I think about when someone comes to us and says, "Hey, I want something to scan this image," that's like 2 steps away from what the problem is. And Will, you just very succinctly and well put, organize the problem of this image. Your scanner against this image is not the truth. The truth is X. We're getting Y. Fix the diff. And like that is something that our team is like, yeah, from that, we are more than capable of going out, asking the questions we need to get the thing done. But when it's like, I want to scan this, it's so much more amorphous and kind of like blobby of, well, where's the feed for it? What images exist? How is it packaged? How's it done? And instead of having that over conversation and doing the bandwidth, just give us the container, give us something to scan, and we can chunk off 95% of the work by just having that thing to inspect and already fit into our ecosystem.
Right. And I would say, like, even if you want to contribute a scanner, like, which awesome, or a vulnerable provider, we love it when people contribute. Um, to contribute something that changes matching behavior, the bar still is, I need a public artifact that has like matching, like today's Grype scan of it is wrong. Right, we're going to ask you to build what we call a quality gate test, which is basically we say like, hey, scan this image with like this build of Grype, and I expect these matches to be present and these matches to be absent. That's the sort of end-to-end test we put around funnel and database changes to ensure that our matching is always getting better. So yeah, I think, and it might be, so maybe a next step here with Clean Start is either them if they're listening, or us, as we could scan. It looks like they have some public Docker sub hub stuff, so we could scan that with Syft Grype and look for something we might be wrong about, and see where it goes. But yeah, and again, that's just occasioned. I don't think they didn't do anything wrong. They opened a very polite issue with a lot of information in it. It just sort of occasioned the conversation because we were surprised about what was in the feed.
Yeah, we're not no call outs against anyone. We just wanted to have a more general discussion about everyone who might want this to see this work. Because we also have something that's currently, we have 3 PRs that were opened about 2 days ago about the largest one is in Funnel, and it's the secure OS provider. And I was kind of looking at the Funnel provider implementation for that yesterday, and just like, this is going to take a good amount of review, but we very much appreciate the effort and thought and time that went into that. So thank you.
Yeah. Should we look at the next issue?
Implementation for that yesterday, just like,
Yeah, I
this is
think
going
that
to take a good amount of
All
review,
right.
but we
Sounds
very
that's
much
good. We could
good.
probably discuss this
the
one
effort and
continually,
thought and time
and
that went into that.
but
So thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. Should we look at the next issue?
Here we go. Feature request, enhance source supplier with contact info.
We can skip that one. There's a PR for this, and I've
Okay.
got some outstanding feedback.
Let's try, what about the next one?
Yeah, let's send it.
Yep. We can skip that one. There's a PR for this.
Uh,
I've got
4324.
outstanding feedback.
Let's try, what about the next one?
Yeah, let's send it.
Yep. We can skip that one. There's a PR for this.
4324. Oh, we did. It looks like we did talk about this in live stream. So
Are there new comments we should take a look at real quick?
no, the last comment was from Will, from you, talking about linking to the live stream where we did the discussion.
Oh,
So it looks like we did talk about this in live stream.
Yeah, I think are there new comments? TLDR is finding
No, the last
finding the same package in multiple places is finding different packages.
To live stream where we did the discussion. So
Because the dependency graphs are different and the owned files are different, and it's just TLDR is finding and so you know that there's some discussion about like merging because sometimes files are different. Like Syft's position is that an SBOM should not be lossy. Like we should lose as little as possible from the file system we scan. But I think some people just want like a list of pearls, like a unique list of pearls that were found in the image. So anyway, let's try the next one.
yeah, I just posted in the stream, but if you're like, if you are new to here and you're confused about like when a package is separated versus when it's merged, the Anchor community account linked to that issue. You can read Alex's comment, and that has a lot of like deeper thoughts that we've discussed in previous streams about when and how a package this is the same versus not. Package is separated versus when it's merged.
The HTTPD tools looks familiar. I think we've discussed that on stream.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Pretty sure it's one of the like upstream package matches.
We could really quickly check whether there's new activity and maybe remove the needs discussion.
Pretty sure it's one of the like upstream package matches.
We could really quickly check whether there's could we restrict upstream package discussion? Yeah, I don't know if we've discussed it since that was added. Yeah, I don't know. Keith, do you feel like we might discuss it again?
I mean, I certainly don't mind. One of the things that came to mind,
I don't know if we've discussed it.
I mean, we have like, you know, when you look at the grand scheme of like how Grype does matching, we kind of have three different tiers of matches. We have the direct match, the indirect match, and the CPE match. And they kind of get progressively worse. And like an exact direct match is like, I have something in an ecosystem and the name matches, you know, that's how we found a thing. You know, the version matches the constraint. And generally speaking, those are like pretty accurate. There's not really, you know, that's what we always want. But then we have this other issue where, for example, OpenSSL is an upstream package of something else, and all the vulnerabilities get reported against OpenSSL. So we have something that's a downstream package. It's not named OpenSSL. And the only way that we can get the correct vulnerability results is to do this indirect upstream match. It's in, you know, in the ecosystem, it has an upstream that's identified as OpenSSL or whatever the upstream package is. The problem is that tends like I don't want to say 50-50, but that definitely results in some false positives.
Yeah.
And so like my question has been like, are there things we could do to fix this? And one of the things that came to mind was, we could add something to the database that says like, don't use this for indirect matches or something, right? Like it's like OpenSSL would probably be like, yes, do use this for indirect matches. But for other things that like might happen to fall into that case, we could potentially, curate the database in a way to do that. Beyond that, I haven't really been able to come up with anything that would work very well.
Right. And it's also like, I mean, a lot of major distros like disclose based on the source or upstream package and not based on, so they say that this CVE affects OpenSSL, and they don't say that it affects this like actual compiled libcrypto RPM or whatever. They just say, and so like we'd miss stuff. And so I think, and like there are places where it leads to kind of silly false positives. Like there was a container tools module that had a CVE against it that was like part of the Go like cryptography library. And like one of the packages in there is in C, not Go. Like it would have to work really hard to be affected by a Go cryptography CVE. But it was in the same thing. And so it would be very hard to address this without either distros changing their behavior and disclosing things at a more granular level, or like paying researchers to decide which CVEs against which CVEs don't count. I wonder if it might make sense to have like a server client marker, right? Or something, right? Like HTTP tools is like testing frameworks and load testers and stuff, right? Like HTTPD is a web server, but then HTTPD tools is like, I don't know. I think the only thing I'm sure that's in it is like a load test generator, which is not affected by server side vulnerability. So I wonder if there's like a server client distinction. Another class of false positives we'll get sometimes is like there's a CVE against like MySQL the server, and then there's like a package that provides MySQL bindings in your favorite language, and like that gets matched. And it's like, no, I mean, you might be affected because presumably if you're using a gem that talks to MySQL, you're also using MySQL somewhere. But it is a false positive. So anyway, yeah, this is in the class of false positives I'm living with, but wish I didn't have to. I don't
Right.
know.
We definitely can't get rid of that behavior. That's for sure. Because I mean, like you said, distros very frequently do report against the upstreams. So
Yeah, I wonder if there are like, and I'm not sure there's sort of three records we could attach, right? We could imagine writing down like HTTPD tools is not affected by purely server side vulnerabilities, right? If there's like denial of service against HTTPD, it doesn't affect the tools library because it's a bunch of like ad hoc client scripts and stuff. So it's not affected by that. But like, I don't know, we could imagine attaching this information to the CVE and say like server only, or like main package only. We could imagine attaching this information to the upstream package and saying, hey, HTTPD, these CVEs are real main server binary only. Or we could imagine attaching it to like the downstream and say HTTPD tools, unless the CVE specifically mentions HTTPD tools, is not a good candidate for upstream matching. Any of those might work, but I think they're all pretty labor intensive because somebody has to write down that fact, at least the way that the upstream data currently stands. So I'm glad that this original poster said that makes sense. In an ideal world, the package would have its own vulnerability management lifecycle. Yes, in an ideal world, it would. Sorry. Yeah. Should we move on to the next one? I think.
well, there's one
Or
other
go ahead,
thing.
Keith.
Yeah, there's one other thing. I mean, and this is the thing. I think like we just don't live in an ideal world, right? So there are things that we have to curate to get better results. Like that's just, as far as I know, the world we live in. You know what I mean? So we do actually just recently have an unaffected packages table that got added to the database. So if we had a community way of submitting data that was included there, then we could have a fairly simple way to get some of these remediated that would sort of apply across the board, maybe.
Right. Somebody could write down that the CVE that affects the server side code, they could write down that
Yeah.
the
Like
tools
HTTP
package is
tools.
unaffected. Yeah.
Right.
And that's a great place to write it down. I think so yeah. Hopefully we can get, because we are starting to build tooling and repositories around like manually correcting bad upstream data. And that's probably all I could commit to on the live stream, but hopefully we will get to the point where you can send us a PR that makes Grype stop showing this. If you could prove to us that, or prove to, if we can all become convinced that that the package really isn't affected, then there will be a spot for you to PR a fix. I will say if you have a GitHub security advisory match, and you think that the data is wrong and not the matching logic, you can PR GitHub security advisories. Just say, hey, it looks like this was patched in an earlier version than you think, and here's a link to the tag or something. They review those. Those help. If you get one merged, it'll be fixed in Grype about the next day. So, yeah.
Yeah.
This is good. Should we remove needs discussion and go on to the next one?
Yeah, I'll pop it off.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, sounds good. Let's go to the next one. Enhanced CVSS sorting.
This sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think we talked about this. I think maybe there's some new activity.
No, there wasn't. We did that PR.
Yeah,
250.
right. We're
Or something.
That makes sense. And so basically this issue came out of like more than one organization had submitted a severity rating for a given CVE and had some users who were concerned because a particular CVE was showing up at either a much higher or much lower rating than the source of truth they were looking at. And so, we had some like, hey, you call this a medium and it's a critical, or you call this a critical and it's a medium. And yeah, so we've got some traction there. Maybe we need to do some more. I think there's a lot of parts of the ecosystem, like Funnel touches severities and does some normalization and some rearranging. GrypeDB touches severities and does some normalization and rearranging. Grype on display has to pick a severity to actually show to people. And so, yeah, there's some work needed here. I don't know that there's a ton more discussion needed here. I would encourage you, if you have opinions on like if 10 people have rated the severity of a given CVE, who wins? If you have opinions on that, this is a great place to comment. But I don't know that we're going to come up with new stuff just by discussing this right now. Maybe we should pull the label and try the next thing.
Good.
Yep. 7 of 6.
All right, let's see.
I think we may have talked about this, but I'm not sure. This is super cool, though.
I think we have, but it may have just been the other community meeting. Can't remember.
Oh, like the internal community meeting, not on stream.
No,
the
the office hours, like the Zoom, like the people join, like not
right.
streamed, but people join meeting. So I added needs discussion. We did discuss it in a live stream on October 9th. And then on October 11th, original poster actually posted a proof of concept. So this is a super cool little Python project. So what they do is they scan a Go binary with like a binary built by Go with Grype, and then they have the output from that, and they downloaded data from Go check, which is like a list of CVEs that affect different Go packages, but it includes like what symbols affect it. And then they used like a Go compiler adjacent tool to like dump all the symbols out of the binary and basically like generate using those inputs, like the CVEs Grype says that affects it, the list of symbols that are actually vulnerable from Go vuln check, and the list of symbols that are actually present from Go compiler tooling. And they were able to show like dropping some false positives based on like the vulnerable package is in the binary, but the vulnerable symbol or the vulnerable code path isn't. That is super cool, and we would love to get it into Grype. And where that is at right now is that Grype operates on the level of an SBOM, not on the level of a file system. So we need some way of like communicating to Grype what symbols are present without putting a list of 17 million struct names in every package in every SBOM. So that's about where that is. Uh, but yeah, the original poster here did a super cool job, and we would love to incorporate this. If you have ideas about incorporating this, you want to work on it. Yeah, feel free to come to office hours or weigh in on the issue. But yeah, really cool thing, and it would let us fix a class of like sort of systematic false positives of like I included the vulnerable package, but I didn't call the vulnerable code, which is a really frustrating class of false positive. And you have to be super careful about it because it's really easy to accidentally make a false negative. But if you have something like a good type checking compiler that says this symbol is absent from the end binary, then you could safely do it. We probably couldn't safely do it in language with more looseness.
Dynamic.
So yeah, I think that's about what we could say about this on stream. I mean, I just mean that's a good summary, not that there's secret additional information. Um, uh, yeah. Does anybody have anything else to add? Should we pull needs discussion and make a new label that says not a good first issue, but boy, this would be really cool.
Yeah,
That's sort of where I
once I get done with some of the AI stuff I have going on in flight, this would be like a cool next thing to pick up to get this into Grype proper. Really thanks to Demao with lots of O's at the end for all of the work and all the contributions here. And the fact that it's like the POC is working now, in case anyone wants to incorporate that, also is we love people that do the solution already, so it just works. And then, you know, we'll try our best to enhance and bring this into the tool. But this is an impressive amount of research, work, and application to a very specific ecosystem that, with the data being there, should be better performant than it is right now in Grype matching. So thank you a ton.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you on this. It's really good work. And like this one's exciting at a somewhat abstract level too, because, you know, we've been dealing with vulnerability data and software identifiers and fundamentally how to match them for years and years and years. And, you know, you probably pick up from the discussion, there's the world is what it is. There's a lot of different data ways of, you know, slicing up the data. But this kind of stuff in particular has always been one of those, wouldn't it be great if the vulnerability sources just went one level of detail down, maybe even two levels of detail down. And you know, now it's happening in this ecosystem, but there's also evidence, I can't remember the link, but I'll try to find it, that there's some of that going on in the Python ecosystem as well. There's some Py vulnerability data sources starting to crop up that actually have some reachability information associated with the vulns as well. That like fundamental concept of adding that level of detail to the vuln sources will certainly reduce the number of FPs and increase accuracy of vuln matching, or just simply ability to prioritize according to reachability substantially, right? So this is exciting stuff.
I also want to highlight that there's two modes of accuracy, and this one deals with the mode of accuracy that I'm like more happy with seeing, which is the reduction in vulnerabilities, because we have had things in the past where we became more accurate, but then our users are like, why does this image all of a sudden have like 20 vulnerabilities in it? It was showing clean last week, and you're like, yeah, our tool got better. And we're really sorry that our tool got, you have to be like, I'm sorry our tool got better. So this is like we're happy our tool got better, and we hope it will bring the noise reduction on the other side. So you need a couple on both sides of the fence to balance the wins for the users as you develop.
Right. And I think that's one of the hard things is that like false negatives are more dangerous and more serious, but like false positives, there's so much noise. Like that's one of the really hard things in this space is just like, you know, like if we have like if we imagine like a sensitivity knob, or if we turn it all the way up, we get lots of false positives but no false negatives. If we turn it all the way down, we get a few false negatives but no false positives. Like different users want it to be in different places, um, because different users have different risk tolerance, and um, but there's like a real cost to managing the false positives. And of course, at scan time, we don't know whether it's going to be a false negative or a false positive. If we did, we would show it correctly. Um, but yeah, so yes, I agree. Like removing classes of false positives is definitely an area of development we're excited to see. So awesome. Hopefully we can get something like this rolled into the main product soon, but there's a Python script that shows you how to do it in post-processing if that's what you want to do.
I think though, I agree. What do you guys think about removing the needs discussion on this? I think it's kind of a
Yeah.
move forward.
Yeah,
I'm just
no, this is
sensitive
like,
to making sure we don't kind of cover the topics again if there hasn't been an update. So yeah, makes sense to me. Oh, next one's interesting. So this is the command output to give more information on what catalogers look for. I know we've had a discussion on this prior, but there might be some updates on this one.
Keith is actually looking at this PR right now. I think he's on line 2000 of 17,000 at the moment.
Yeah, let me look at I can post a real quick comment that might be interesting. But what's that number again? The issue number?
This is 4155.
Okay.
Chat.
Let's see. Doesn't look too terrible. All right, there we go. Yes, there is a pull request, and it has some output, like you can now see on the screen right there. So,
oh, sorry, I just went to the wrong thing. Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so it lists out all of the expressions for what type of file globs that are looked for in the different catalogers and the different parsers. And if you scroll over, it also shows you what the catalogers support in terms of dependencies and licenses and some other features right there. And so this might not be the final form, but definitely something that's fairly close that looks like that today.
That is epic. Boy, seeing it in this form makes you really realize there's a lot of code to do this.
Yeah, and one of the interesting ones is that that binary classifier up towards the beginning. You can kind of see, oh, these are all of the binaries that we can classify, by way of those expressions. So if there's a question like, hey, why doesn't it find my MySQL binary that's named foo? Well, it's because of that. Doesn't match foo.
Excellent. Yeah, so I think maybe is there anything that we need to discuss in terms of like format of output or, um,
No, not really. I think this could get needs discussion taken off also. I'm not really sure why it still has it, to be honest, but
yeah,
Yeah. I would just add that we were gonna so we generally have a like Syft the CLI won't break during 1.0. This PR is going to get merged without that guarantee on this particular PR. So if you're writing, like you can do dash once this merges, you can do dash o JSON and get like this table, but as a JSON document. But we sort of, because this is an experiment and we need to consume it internally to generate docs and stuff, we sort of reserve the right to change our mind about how that JSON looks. Because it's like not an output, it's not a core functionality of the tool. So just
yeah,
just be warned, if you're parsing it, you're not under the like 1.0, the same data class will always parse this JSON for the rest of 1.0 guarantee.
yeah.
don't worry, it prints a nice warning, and you have to use an environment variable to enable it. And yeah, so it's pretty clear that it's not 1.0 guarantee support there.
Excellent. That's great. Great progress on that one. Cool. All right. Well, let's flip over and see what's next.
I feel like we've discussed that one too.
We did discuss it. Let's see if there's any updates here.
Yeah, if memory serves, this sort of is in a bit of a limbo because the leading thought was that we need to be able to sort of match on maybe major versions only to determine if there are fixes available, and then like exclude something that's a different major version that doesn't have a fix, that type of thing. But like, I don't think we've quite worked out all of the details about how to do that in the most meaningful way.
Right. So normally, like in Red Hat land in particular, like if you have if you're scanning Red Hat 9 and there's no fix, but there is a fix in Red Hat 10, dash dash only fixed will filter that because we're not going to tell you you need to go get Red Hat 10. Um, but Red Hat EUS is on like point versions where like Red Hat 9.4 is a distro upgrade behind Red Hat 9.6 in EUS land. And so dash dash only fix doesn't know that minor versions matter in Red Hat EUS land, and it should. And this is ready. Um, I think it could kind of be worked on, but I don't think it needs discussion anymore. That was I think my comment there on October 22nd is a pretty good explanation, but I think this became less ambiguous. Um, it's just kind of interesting that like the a lot of people want the behavior of like only show me vulnerabilities I can do something about, right? That's what dash dash only fixed really means. But like if you've got enough time, you can fix everything, right? Like a lot of this stuff is open source and you could go fix the underlying cryptography libraries. You're not going to, like, that's not a reasonable course of action available to you. And so, like, where we put the line for like only show me stuff that I'm willing to fix is kind of variable. But another one we've had is like, don't show me fixes that require bumping to a new language version. Like, like there are fixes like this is a Java 11 app and you're suggesting upgrades that require making it a Java 17 app. I don't have time to make it a Java 17 app. I don't want to see them. That's another one. Um, and so right now, only fixed means don't tell me to cross distro upgrade barriers, basically. Um, like filter and that's not perfect. So I don't know if we wanted to keep discussing. The discussion is like, what other things do people not want to upgrade?
Well, I think
I think
there's an interesting point here too, which is that we don't show fixes here when maybe somebody could upgrade their distro, right? Because we are restricting the queries to be only within, a particular version range. And so like I think there's a flip side to this, which is like there are probably some people who would want to know how to get rid of these vulnerabilities, even if it means taking that extra step and upgrading, their base OSs on things or whatever.
Yeah, that's where my head goes too. Like this almost feels like a different type of analysis, where it's probably not just about, in many cases, a single vulnerability, but rather a collection. Like, because that decision you're talking about, Keith, like, do I move from Red Hat 9 to Red Hat 10? Or heck, do I move from Red Hat to Ubuntu? Is a more global action, and so I think it might need more of a global analysis. I do think it's really interesting though. There's a broad spectrum of ways to remediate vulnerabilities, but the most actionable and the approach that the tools have right now is like it's almost like what's the smallest step that can be taken to get rid of this vulnerability, assuming the underlying assumption is you want to get rid of it fast with minimal disruption. But on the other side of the token is if you abandon that last thing, ignoring the level of disruption, what are the options? To me, it's less about a vulnerability scan and more about an assessment of a big pile of security findings.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've heard Will mention before too, like maybe I want to see like I've got 100 vulnerabilities, like what's the single step that I could take to get rid of the most of them, even if that step is, like you said, moving between distros or whatever that happens to be. I think that's a really interesting and extremely valuable, piece of knowledge there.
It would be hard because it requires sort of like scanning a hypothetical artifact. Right. It requires like, let's take this Docker image and pretend it was built on Ubuntu one version up from the one it's on and scan it again and see what the scan looks like. Is like, we can't really simulate that at runtime. Like that's too much. We don't know that, but it might be possible to take a dependency graph and say like this npm package is the root of like a subtree that pulls in a pile of CVEs. This is the one you should look at. That might be feasible because it's just a property of the scan and the SBOM. It's not a property of the wider ecosystem. Yeah. So that would be like, that's my like, I'm actually gonna ask for it for Christmas version of the like, please tell me what to fix feature.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think maybe this one though, it sounds like since it's moved to ready, we can probably remove needs discussion. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Let's keep going. Got about 8 minutes left, so it's probably time for one, maybe two more. Which ones would you guys like to talk about? You want to check out PRs?
Yeah, we can look at some PRs, see what's happening.
See what's over here.
There's if anyone's watching and was worried about, we had a bug about go replace directives, keeping around packages that were found to actually not exist in the dependency tree. I just read through that PR before the live stream and merged it, so that bug should be fixed with the next Syft going out. So thank you for appreciate the community identifying that one. I'll link it in our chat real quick. Replace.
Package dependency completeness field is a big topic, but it might be fun to start the conversation on.
Yeah, happy to talk about that one.
So that's basically like, so Syft tries to find dependency relationships. And some languages, there's like a lock file that describes a tree. So we could say like package A installs package B and package B installs package C and package C installs package D. And we can make this nice little tree and it's complete. And we have this like complete directed graph of who asked for what. And that's awesome. And some languages are less like that. And some languages, we can find all the dependencies, but we can't tell who asked for them. In some languages, we can't find any of the dependencies. And what we'd like to do is have a field in the SBOM that reports how good the dependency graph is for packages. That's basically what this PR is about. And so we are thinking about this as either like it's either on the package object or it's on the edge between packages, where we could say like a complete package has all of its dependencies resolved. If it's incomplete, then we're not sure if it's complete with indirect. That's like Go, like a Go binary. We will find all the dependencies, but we cannot tell you why the Google Go Container Registry is linked into that binary. We can just tell you that the Google Go Container Registry. So that's like complete with indirect. And then there are a couple other options. And so I think the discussion here is maybe just last time I looked at this was okay, literally a year ago, but there was a lot of discussion about like, what is this?
If memory serves, like the biggest outstanding question really has still been, where does that indication go? Is it on the package or somewhere else on a relationship, which you can't really put on the relationship in our model. And
Right.
I think we've sort of circled back to, well, just putting it on the package is probably the right place given our current state
Yeah.
of things.
Right. And then what it would mean is like from this package, like on package A, like if you recurse down into the dependency tree from package A, is it complete? Is it complete with indirect? Is it incomplete? Is it whatever?
Right. And the thing is that ends up being still yet even challenging because, like, for example, if we scan a lock file, we return a whole bunch of packages and they are all like a complete set of indirect dependencies, but there's no source package that they are related to. So, like, I think, yeah, I think it's like, it's kind of challenging given our current
Right.
data
And
model.
and we've actually done a lot of work on this relatedly in the describe all the catalogers, like Syft's capabilities are self-describing issue we talked about, because one of the things that that is hopefully going to output is the type of dependency. So you can see like, oh, if I'm scanning cargo lock, I get better dependency information than if I'm scanning, I don't know, setup.py. Setup.py is kind of, we do our best, but it's really hard to know because it's just a Python file and you can put any Python program you want in there and who knows what it does. Um,
Yeah, that big chart that we were looking at before from the output had all of those pieces of data right there. So
yeah, but a lot of those are sort of maintained manually right now. Like somebody is going in and like basically writing down like, hey, this cataloger finds this kind of dependency. Um,
and some of them are dependent on configuration.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's really hard. And we've been talking about like one of the discussions was like, is this one enum or two enums? Like, is completeness and like because there's sort of three things people are interested in with the dependencies. Like, did you find them all? And then a really common feature request is like, can you stop telling me about dev dependencies? Please stop telling me about dev dependencies, because like Syft in its default configuration is just complete. It's like I found all these npm packages. They're all npm packages, and they're like, yeah, but I don't run jest in production, right? And that's a fair point. And so we want to we want to specify like sort of, I don't know, like a lot of Python package managers call this group. I think a lot of package managers just have two groups, which is like regular and dev. um some package managers have the notion of extra dependencies, like where you have like, did this bring in like, I did cargo add serde, but did I bring in XML? Did I bring in the derive macros? Um, And so there's all kinds of like we want to talk about the completeness, we want to talk about whether we can see transitivity, and we want to talk about like what kind of group it is, like what type of edge is it. Is it like this package has a dev dependency on this package? Does it have a runtime dependency on this package? Are we in a language where that doesn't make sense to ask? Like, and so I think a lot of what has held this up is just the data model of the output isn't obvious. Maybe it would be good to have a longer discussion on the stream about what that data model could look like.
Yeah, and maybe it's a good time to do it. This is Alex's PR, and while you were describing that, Will, I popped over to a issue that Keith had linked for somebody asking for that level of control that you mentioned, right? They don't want to see the whole thing, or at least be able to control it, which has made some progress. So yeah, maybe it's time to when next time Alex is on, we'll revisit this one. So let's leave the needs discussion on it, so that it's a reminder to us to go over it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's 4 o'clock now, so we're about to shut down. But I do think eventually we won't have to be able to do generic solution for things like the dev dependencies, and that's going to be like a per cataloger config switch that then like gets controlled by a master switch of like, do you want all or none? And then you can also start tweaking all or none for individual ones if you don't want the heavy-handed like large switch to turn on and off. But for stuff that's like transitive and direct, that's easy to see in the tree.
Yep. Yeah, good point. Okay, well, with that, you're right. We are at the top of the hour, so I think we covered a lot of issues today. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you team for going in depth into all these tickets and issues. Very compelling discussion today. Thanks everyone so much. We'll be back next week, but we'll end it for now. So I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Take care all.